Intelligent Community Forum is something that I founded with two other gentlemen to focus on the issue of how broadband and information and communications technologies of all kind are being used by communities around the world to build their economies. Really a new thing, at least 10 years ago when we started. When we started 10 years ago, broadband was not even a really recognized term as it is today. And so we look at that issue, we always bring it back to the work, that third of Julian's important things for every community, and then everything else that flows from it, the social improvement, the social changes, cultural strengthening, and so forth. What I want to talk to you about today is, if I can push the right button. Well, no, that wasn't the right button. Let's try another button. How about that? No, how about that button? I'm good at this stuff. You wouldn't think so, would you? Thank you. Escape.
Right.
That'll do. Okay, so we have this term intelligent community, and we mean some very specific things by it. And it's these things. When we say what makes a community intelligent, there's a speaker from the deep south in our country who likes to say, can you have an intelligent community full of dumb people? He says, you better hope so. Because you can change the technology, the people are harder. But basically, being an intelligent community is all about understanding this broadband economy. That's a term that we use that's, you could also say globalization, but we like this because I think it tells you why it's happening. Why the world is changing so fast underneath it. It's because we're all connected at high speed, or not all, but more and more of us are connected at high speed all the time. Intelligent communities are ones which are determined to take control of their own destiny, and I was very pleased and excited by some of John's points about do what you can do today with the technology that exists today. By all means, continue to plan for a future, because it may not be as grim as I know he feels it is. I certainly prefer to think it is not. But let's make sure to do today what we can do. And what is called here in the UK sheer bloody-minded perseverance, or the relentless drive to adapt and grow. Failure is not an option. And that's intelligent communities just have that attitude. They have that attitude. So these three things tend to determine, if you will, the culture of the intelligent community. And I'm going to talk in specifics about what they do a bit more. I mentioned broadband economy, and I just wanted to drill into that a little bit. In the broadband economy that we all live in this room certainly, the hardworking people in some of the places that Julian talked about live right next door to us for economic purposes. They live right next door. The trick, of course, is they don't get paid what we get paid. Hence most of the turmoil you read about, whether it's flight of jobs and investment. By the way, not just flight, meaning everything leaving, it's flight of jobs and investment to locations that offer the best mix of costs, of appropriate skills for those costs, and access to markets. So the reason that companies like Siemens open a center in Singapore, although that's a relatively high-cost place too, is because it's next to their markets, and they can get the appropriate skills there. The reason you move factories to parts of China is because if you're just bashing metal, you don't need a very high skill to do that. In many cases, and so you want to pay appropriately for that. It's the world we live in. Supercharged competition, because we're so connected. The product cycle. If you talk to anybody in business, one of their complaints will be, it used to be we'd invent something new, and we'd be able to be new and improved for 5 years, and then it was new and improved for 3 years, and then it was 18 months, and now we're down to a year. So you have to constantly rev this innovation engine just to survive, just to prosper. Rise in the minimum skill level. It's not, it's not that people got stupider in the last 10 years in the West. It's just the minimum skill level to have a middle-class life has gone way, way, way up. Local economic success inevitably depends on things that you don't control, increasingly, all around the world. And all of this comes down here, which is what people who work in city government deal with every day, the social stresses. So it is really all about the connectivity. The bad and the good. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of good. Because intelligent communities are able to create a virtuous cycle. They're able to move from stuck to successful by focusing on a set of what we call the intelligent community indicators. And it all starts with broadband. Why? Well, it's like oxygen. You don't notice each breath you take. At least, I hope you don't, because I hope you have better things to do. I certainly don't. But when I can't take that next breath, suddenly I notice it. And increasingly, that's what broadband has become. It is the infrastructure we need to have to survive, because so much economic value runs through it. But it's really just the start. Broadband is powerful because it enables us to build and also takes advantage of broadband. It takes advantage of a knowledge-based workforce. Broadband is powerful because this is increasingly where the economic value is coming from, particularly in high-cost countries like ours, like this one, like the one I come from. You have to have people, not just graduate students, not just engineers, not just researchers, people in the checkout counter, people running process control factory equipment, people doing all manner of work increasingly have to have more and more knowledge about how it's done. And they also have to have the ability to gain knowledge about it, because the one thing you're sure of is they're not going to be in their job for their entire lifetime. They're going to be in many different jobs. And the ability to continuously learn is what distinguishes successful communities from non-successful communities. I mentioned the product cycle. The reason that broadband is vital and knowledge work becomes vital is because you want this. Unless you're sitting on top of a lot of oil, a lot of copper, or some other strategic material, this is the most valuable resource that you have. The ability to produce things fast, come up with new ideas, to take, whether it's in government, to take an exciting example, such as your mobile example on bus schedules, to turn your traffic management system into something that's consumer-based, or whether it's in business. You need to have extremely innovative companies if you're going to create employment, meaningful employment, good jobs. So you start with this, you power this up, you're trying to build a workforce able to do this so you can get to innovation, and suddenly you have a powerful cycle lifting your community. While you're doing it, however, you also have to work on digital inclusion if you're an intelligent community. And why? Well, because you already have a segment of your population that's on the margins or below the margins. If you're very successful at doing this, you make their lives much worse. You marginalize them even more. And you can't afford to do that in a modern, high-cost society. Why? Well, first of all, it's morally wrong. You don't want to live in that place where we're happy to marginalize folks. But secondly, it costs you a tremendous amount of money, whether it's for crime, whether it's for social services, whether it's for health care that's far more expensive than it should be because it's always acute care rather than chronic care. So you need to work on bringing as many of these folks in as you can, and this is one of the hardest jobs available. This is one of the hardest jobs available. This is about creating skills in people who don't have them, creating motivation in people who may not have motivation to join this broadband economy. This is one of those goals we'll never reach, but we need to work it very hard and very creatively, and some amazing things are being done right here in the UK as well as elsewhere to do that. And of course, if you bring more of those people into your economic cycle, you get more and more out of it at the other end. And finally, and perhaps most surprisingly, we discovered as we researched that intelligent communities are very good marketers. They tell their story extremely well to the outside world to help with business attraction and so forth. But perhaps most importantly, they advocate for it powerfully inside the community. And that's because certainly in the communities most of you come from, you don't really get going until the people want to go someplace. You can deliver all the directives you want from Brussels or from London or from any place else, and it will not make the slightest bit of difference compared to powering up a local community and saying, I want to go someplace. And one of the characteristics I see over and over again when I visit communities is that they are proud of themselves. If your community is proud of its digital future that it's building toward, you've got a very powerful thing happening. Okay, Europe happens to offer some absolutely world-leading examples of intelligent communities, and the dots on the map are all communities that have been honored in our Intelligent Community Awards, which we do every year. It is a cleverly disguised research project. We give awards to people. In return, they give us incredibly valuable information about how they did the things for which we are awarding them. Well, I can't do the math, but at 11 a.m. in Suwon, South Korea, on the 21st of October, we will announce our Smart 21, which is our semi-finalists for our next year's cycle. I think that's about, I can't do the math. So we begin yet again, and it's a never-ending show that we're always happy to do. All these communities have been in that, and I want to just drill briefly into 3 of them to talk about the specifics of how they did what they did. Dundee, to the north of us, nice little place, about 142,000 people. A little grim in winter, but hey. In the springtime when I visited it, it was snowy, cold, sunny, and wonderful. You probably know their history better, certainly, than anybody who I normally speak to in the States or in Asia would know, but they were the city of German journalism. They were the place to be in the 19th century. Very powerful, very potent economy, until the same thing that happened to so many of us happened to them, deindustrialization. And they, at that point, looked like the place you wanted to leave. Thousands and thousands of jobs, outmigration, retail base eroding, all the things that look like a terminal spiral. But being people who were not willing to accept the terminal spiral, they began fighting, and they developed something called the Dundee Partnership. Again, this is not an original idea, but done extremely well here. A partnership of city government leaders, of business leaders, of the leaders of their universities, hospitals, and other nonprofit institutions. They in Dundee did something that I consider very much a best practice. Normally, when you do one of these partnerships, in the States we call it a blue ribbon commission. And quickest way to make sure that an idea goes away to die is to give it to a blue ribbon commission, because the great and the good will gather together and make learned pronouncements, issue a paper, and it's all over, thank God. Instead, since they didn't want it to go away, they started with their mid-level frontline staff, and they had meetings and they spent time together, a few years together, working on specific projects and building trust. So that when it came time for leadership to get involved, there was an infrastructure, a group that could actually take action on things. And so the partnership ended up being pretty powerful. A lot of what they do is research. What's going on in our community? And that research discovered that in the midst of this never-ending stagnation and decline of their manufacturing base, there were some green shoots. Their universities were actually beginning to spin out some new, small companies doing, of course, they did their own research and publishing, but the spin-outs were in things that had never been done in Dundee, at least it was not part of the self-image of the community. Software, animation, computer games, this new interesting thing that's a bigger industry than automotive now. Well, what they did right was to gather up all their resources and bend down and fan the flame. And they did it in so many different ways. The universities did what they did. They developed degree programs and research centers focusing on some of these growth disciplines. And the city put money with the universities into incubators and business parks and things that we're all familiar with. And they set up some smart marketing partnerships, Bio Dundee and digital, I can't remember the other one, something Tayside, focused on digital media. And then they did something else that government can do today. They began focusing on how can we save money on save our taxpayers' money and deliver better service. So they set up something they called the Citizen Account, a relationship management system, and a special Dundee Discovery card. They took a whole bunch of different smart cards and all rolled them into one, and made it cheaper, faster, better. And they put in, a WAN system where none existed. And just recently, they've had so much going on, they managed to fast talk the I3 group in deploying fiber optics through their sewers at no cost to the city. Because I3 group thinks it can make a lot of money delivering IPTV. And the first places they're going to wire up are the council housing. Why? Because people in the council housing, they watch television. They watch television. So you have a lot of activity, all from different sectors of the community, with impact. They're still losing manufacturing jobs, 3,000 in the past 3 years. But they gained 1,000 jobs in growth sectors, the sectors that are going to continue to accelerate. When NCR, the US computer company, moved a bunch of jobs out, they decided to keep their R&D center in Dundee. That was what a validation of a strategy. A recognition that, it's difficult to make money manufacturing in Scotland if we're just bashing metal. But if we need people's brains, that's different. Great example here of just a program I just want to share with you briefly, because I'm aware of time and I'm between you and lunch. Dare to be Digital. Has anyone heard of this? A couple of people have heard of this. Dundee's become a gaming center. When I was there last, I was lucky enough to meet with some of the heads of the gaming companies, So they've got this nice expertise. And the Abertay University has a graduate degree program in gaming. Okay, two things. Well, can we do something with those two elements today? What they've done is they've set up a contest called Dare to be Digital. And they advertise all around the UK, all throughout Europe. They've actually had submissions come in from as far away as China. You propose to them to build a game you want to build. And they pick a certain number of these, and they bring the young people to Dundee. And they put them through an incredibly intense 10-week program in which they work with instructors at the universities and with the gaming professionals, the people who build these games for a living. And at the end of the 10 weeks, they have a prototype. And they hold a week-long festival, Dare to be Digital, and the entire community comes in and plays the games. And they vote on who's the best game, and they have a learned panel of experts who also vote on the best games. And almost every year, one of those winners ends up in the British Digital Media Award program, whose name I can never remember. So, very simple, but think about all the pieces, how those pieces relate. You have Abertay University advertising its expertise worldwide. You have gaming companies recruiting and finding new talent, and also demonstrating how powerful they are. You have an event that brings together the community around a growth sector in the future and explains to people in a very graphic, intuitive way why that's where Dundee's future is going. So I think that's an immensely imaginative thing to do. It's fairly simple to pull off, that will continue to drive growth in Dundee. Let's go across the channel to Issy-les-Moulineaux, a suburb of Paris. I have not yet been there, which is really annoying to me. My colleagues have each been, but it's my turn next, I hope. Population of 63,000, not large, but it is right on the banks of the Seine across from Paris, so there's obviously a lot of benefit to them economically from that. They're called Issy-les-Moulineaux because they used to have a lot of windmills. Then they had a lot of factories, and then after the factories were rebuilt following the Second World War, they too shed jobs, began to fall apart as an economy, experienced high unemployment, population losses, and the same story. But they had some things going for them. Their location, they're right next to La Défense, so there's a lot of government and military stuff there. France Telecom has a big R&D lab. French Army headquarters is there, so there's a stable base of funding to do things, to keep the economy rolling over a little bit. Back in 1980, it was a long time ago, they elected a gentleman named André Santini to be the mayor, and I don't think they knew what they were getting into. He said, we're going to rebuild this entire economy, and it's going to be a high-tech economy. And, I said, okay, fine, great, sure you are. Please pass the bread and cheese. But he didn't think they had a choice, and he felt the kind of urgency that John was talking about. This has got to be done now. Well, being French, they took a very French approach, which was not a lot of grassroots work as we saw perhaps in Dundee. They said, we're going to start at the top and go down. We're a dirigiste state. We're going to create an entire ecosystem that will power the building of this economy. So they came up with a comprehensive information plan in 1994. I happen to be very fond of it because it was based on, it asked all the people working in the city departments to go out and study what was being done with the internet in the United States, which I don't care whether it's the United States, but it's the date that I like. This is the year that Netscape was founded. The company that made the first commercial browser was just getting started in 1994, and these people were already seeing that there was going to be something big there before the rest of us saw it. In the same year, they said, we don't want to do IT anymore. They outsourced the entire thing to a company because they wanted a high rate of change. They've since, by the way, taken it back inside because they became dissatisfied with the high rate of change. They wanted a higher rate of change. But so they were able to put up all the stuff that we're becoming familiar with: access to council meetings online, a citizen relationship management program, online permits filing, document access, tax payment, et cetera, et cetera. All good stuff because it lowers the cost of government and increases citizen participation. When France Telecom was privatized and the market thrown open somewhat, as it is in all of our countries, we're not very good at breaking up monopolies. Santini and his team had already gone out and done some preliminary deals with some alternative carriers, so when the big bang happened, they switched on service, same day. So all of a sudden we had alternative carriers who could, of course, lower our costs, because when we get competition, we get lower costs. And they put all this great stuff. CTV is online, and they have webcams in kindergarten, so you can go and see how your little puppy is doing there. And they have cyber tea rooms where the elderly can go into a nice, comfortable tea room they're used to and be trained in digital skills. And you can participate in making a budget if you're a really brave citizen and want to go through that. And all the stuff we're used to, right? Digital media centers, business incubation. So a lot of work over a long time. The government paid for most of it. That was their model. But they did pretty well. Almost 60% of all businesses in EC are in ICT today. That was their goal. They wanted to be in communications and information technology. They've had a 36% population growth from 1990 to 2010 with no increase in government payrolls. Yes, ICT can help you when those nasty cuts come. They've got 70,000 jobs in the community, 63,000 residents. Pretty nice. 98% of in some ways, this is my favorite one. 98% of the population said the internet has changed their lives. It has, of course, but it's nice for them to recognize it. Great old example. They, of course, have a football team, so they created a web portal to give fans access to all the nitty-gritty detail, and every week they get to vote on who should get fired. Just engaging the passions of the community. And this is something, by the way, that I think this is an opportunity that communities very often fail to take advantage of. If you put all this good work into e-government and so forth, you are sitting on top of all this information your citizens want to have. And so you have a great lever to get them to come to you. As long as you make it extremely easy, as long as you make the citizen not just a recipient, but a participant in what you're doing in governing him or her. Last example, and then I'll stop. Across the water, Eindhoven, we have Joep Brouwers. Where are Joep? Here from Eindhoven. I like this story because there's a big picture model that can be adapted in all sorts of places. And I was just recently doing a talk like this in a place with communities that were 2,000 people, 5,000 people. And rural communities in particular are very proud of being rural, and they like to explain to you that, but these examples you give us, they don't apply. They're all big, big rich communities. And so I told them the story about a county that I know that it had broadband running along the major motorway, but that was it. They couldn't get carriers to do anything for them. So they got really angry, and the county executive went out and talked to the 23 municipalities and the school districts and various other entities and put it all together and discovered that they controlled millions of dollars in telecommunications spending. So it got them all to agree that they would stop spending it with the carriers, that they would instead just capitalize a new network, which they did. Now, very successful, has 3,000 companies on it in addition to the institutions, runs 800 miles. And everybody was nodding their heads out in the audience, and I said, and the county is Westchester, which is on the northern border of the city of New York. It contains some of the richest postal codes in America. The same lessons work everywhere. It's just you scale them and you design them right. So I know. In Holland's industrial heartland, big population, 21 municipalities, big famous company, Philips headquarters, helped build the town. Apparently, I actually learned last night, Philips actually literally built the town. Company that without which there would be no silicon chip in your digital device. Huge university. Usually their employment rate is higher than the Dutch average. I think it's a little bit below right now because they're getting hit by the recession. But here's the question. They're manufacturing in a very high-cost country. How on earth do they do that? How do they stay successful? It's a very dangerous thing to be, a manufacturing center in a high-cost country. Well, they work the problem. They have this thing called Braincore. And Braincore is a little organization, a powerful organization, public-private co-op of business, government, chambers of commerce, universities, institutes. And I think that they're a model. I think that this model can be adapted in many places. It's an open platform for innovation. They have a full-time staff that runs around talking and having meetings, and endless meetings, and I'm sure that after a while they just want to kill themselves to have so many meetings, but they get some very powerful things out of it. They're looking for, from all of these stakeholders who are members of Braincore, they're looking for, what are you good at? Where's your gaps? Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? What do you need? And can we find somebody else in this network to get it done for you? So they focus on getting ICT to increase productivity. They want high growth businesses. They want continuous upgrading of skills and knowledge in their citizens and employees. And they have an enormous number of projects. I could spend a lot of time talking about them, but they typically have 80 projects running at any given time. Again, scale, 750,000 people. You can do that. But you can also have 3 projects running if you're a smaller place. A couple of my favorites. Design Connection Braincore. I like this one because it doesn't seem very important, but they realized that industrial design was a foundational thing in Eindhoven. Every single product that comes out of every factory incorporates design. As we all know from watching Apple take over the world of technology, design is powerful. So they decided, let's really become the world's best at industrial design. That will help power our economy's innovation. The National Swimming Institute, they happen to have a gold medalist swimmer there, whose name I will not even try to murder for you. In fact, please.
Pieter van Hogeband.
That's why I didn't do it. In the swimming pool, they've set up cameras along there. They've got a lot of sophisticated software that they developed with a local university. And so if you're a competitive swimmer, you jump into that pool, swim back and forth, and then they'll show you yourself swimming in slow motion, reverse, forward, different points of view to show you your mistakes so you can trim those hundredths of a second off your time, creating a world-class cluster of knowledge about it. And you have different partners all working together to get something done. They focus a lot on knowledge workers, so they've got all these cool programs in their secondary schools to get kids excited about technology and playing games in schools to do things. They have a lot of digital quality of life because one of the things they've realized is that talent is their scarcest resource. They have to get it from all over the world. Typically, there's not a lot of mobility, labor mobility in Europe, so they're trying to break that cycle. They're trying to get a lot of excitement, festivals, and an expat guide online to help you move in, and Digital City Eindhoven. You can wander around and with your mobile and figure out what you like best about the city, and probably what you like least about the city. So a lot of exciting stuff is all being powered. Again, this is about building this is about advocacy. This is about building the future. Just a quick example to sort of give you the idea of how this works when it works well, and I'm sure that they have lots of times when it doesn't work well, because we all do. And part of the art of this, of course, is to, when you find the thing that isn't working well, stop doing it. That's the hardest thing to do in government, but stop doing it. They've got a local company started by a guy in his university dormitory room that custom builds computers, laptops, PCs. And he now also sells branded systems. It's an impressive place, probably several hundred employees. Braincore came to him with something that a need that they had uncovered, which was that the 800 regional schools had a lot of challenges around information technology. Well, surprise, surprise, we all know how difficult it is to manage properly. So they all got together and came up with a solution. And today, if you're a student in one of these schools, you get your laptop from the school. They've got one of those one laptop per child programs. You open it up, you boot it, you connect to the network, and it downloads all the applications that you as that student are supposed to have. And it also connects you into their online collaboration platform for students, for teachers, administrators, and parents. And Paradigit does all the remote management of all the servers, all the equipment, and they do it with 3 people, because they work very hard on building the applications and building the platform so that it does not break. That's 3 people, not per shift, that's 3 people. So you can guess they don't get very many trouble calls. So here's what's powerful. Paradigit is a local company, the schools are local, the money being spent is going back into the local economy, helping to develop a platform which Paradigit ultimately can take international. Small example, but powerful. All right, my closing thoughts for you. I was asked to provide some reflection on, well, I frankly think it's probably a little bit above my pay grade, but some reflection on what European communities, intelligent communities are doing right, and perhaps what they're not doing right. In terms of what they're doing right, these 3 examples, I think, are very good illustrations of it. When it's working, it's because you have very effective governance that's responsive to the citizens, that involves citizens very much in the process, but doesn't just sit there and say, well, what do you want? What do you want? Exercises visional leadership, says, we think you know what it is, and we're going to convince you, if it's a good idea, of where we're going. and manages a very skillful balance between the local, locally conceived and locally driven initiatives that really unleash the ingenuity and innovation at the local level. As you can tell, I'm a passionate believer that it's all local. It's all ultimately local. That's the pointy end of the spear, is always local. But inevitably coordinates with other levels of government, particularly if you can get some money from them, and to make sure that your policies line up a little bit. And I know the lining up of policies consumes a lot of energy and time in Europe. When it doesn't work, this is what I personally see. I think there's a lot of time spent waiting for someone to tell you what to do, whether it's Brussels or it's London or it's some other capital, rather than just saying, what is it we need to do? Let's get going. It's viewing this massive web of regulations and rules that you've built here in Europe to protect an excellent quality of life, viewing it as a ceiling, that's I dare not go higher, than as a floor, as a place. If there's some regulations that are in your way, well, what can we do to work with them creatively to make sure we can do what it is we want to do? And this will tell you, if you're just chasing the next grant, you don't have a strategy. What you have is grant chasing, which is nice. I guess it produces some money, but it doesn't move your community forward in a sustained way. So my 2 cents, I guess, yeah, I can do cents. I can do cents both here and in Europe. My 2 cents on when it works and when it doesn't. So that brings me to the end of my remarks, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.